Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Drums, please.
Here it is, a groove slightly transformed. Just a bit of a break from the norm. Just a little something to break the monotony of all that hardcore dance that has gotten to be a little bit out of control. It's cool to dance, but what about a groove that soothes and moves romance? Give me a soft, subtle mix. And if it ain't broke, then don't try to fix it. And think of the summers of the past. Adjust the bass and let the Alpine blast. Pop in my CD and let me run a rhyme and put your car on cruise and lay back, cause it's summertime.
It's not exactly my cup of tea. I will not tell a lie, nor did I expect it to be the preferred cup of tea of Ron, who requested it. I think it's the Ron I met that one day at that place that one time. Didn't strike me as the kind of guy that was into DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, but nonetheless, we are playing today because summer starts just after 10:30 tonight. Bring it on, bring the heat. Never let winter return. I think if we try hard enough this summer, we can just push winter away forever. Anyway, we are playing your favorite summer tunes by request. It's an all-request Friday, and maybe it's because summer arrives tonight. Maybe it's just because it's Friday and it's long overdue, but gosh darn it, we're going to try our very best to inject extra fun into the show today because it's a Friday show, and Fridays should be fun. Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince takes us back to 1991. As I said, not really my cup of tea. I've never really been into rap and or hip hop, but hey, there's different kinds of music for different kinds of tastes. And I will say this much, at least, listening to that from 1991, a little bit, I mean, listen, we can celebrate our city's name being dropped in a rap track by one of Canada's best rappers, right?
Some nights I want to cut because the city's been hot like lava. Yeah, little Waterloo road trip. Shorty see me and said, oh, girl, that's Mr. Tumaza.
A little bit of Drake and some guy named Smiley and a song called Tumaza, which is too crazy. You heard only one little blip in there because we had to edit out to make it safe for radio play. Listen, you want to hang on to the reference to Waterloo and get excited that the city got name dropped in a song by Drake. I counted 5 F-bombs and 4 uses of the N-word in the lyrics of that song, but listen, but he said Waterloo. So, okay, again, not my cup of tea. I'm not Drake's intended audience. I get that. But I also don't think that song is going to be played before too many Waterloo Council meetings in the near future. Let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Friday morning, the 20th of June. Number 1, the heat is on as summer's arrival is imminent. A warming trend that starts today will take us into a full-blown heat wave for the next several days, with temperatures feeling like the low to mid-40s when you factor in that humidex. Summer officially arrives tonight. just after 10:30. Number 2, it's the end of a motorcycling era in Cambridge as Blackbridge Harley-Davidson announces its closure. The dealer's sister store, Rockies in London, also closing. The company cites a changing market and the current economic landscape as the main factors in the closure. 39 employees will lose their jobs at Blackbridge in Cambridge, which is shutting down at the end of the month. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Strapped Fitness celebrates its grand opening in Waterloo this weekend. Strapped says fitness should be effective, sustainable, and smart, not just trendy or extreme. A grand opening party is being held Sunday from 10 until 4 with vendors, giveaways, and refreshments. Strapped Fitness is at 25 Columbia Street East in Waterloo. Number 4, after 9 vehicle break-ins in Waterloo, 2 people are now facing multiple charges. Police said this week there had been a rash of break-ins over 3 weeks near the University District of Waterloo. A 29-year-old woman from Kitchener and a 36-year-old man from Cambridge now facing charges that include break and enter, theft of credit cards, and breach of probation. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, new artwork in Waterloo Public Square will mark National Indigenous Peoples Day. Artist Maddie Resmer of Western Sky Designs says her latest piece is all about connection.
Connection to ourselves, to our fellow two-leggeds, the humans, to the rest of nature, to the fish and the animals and the trees and the sky beings, the lightning and the birds and the rain. For the past 2 years that I've been fortunate enough to design the mural for Waterloo Public Square, I have painted the mural directly onto the concrete in the square. This year we decided to try something new, so I'm a digital artist as well, and I designed an illustration that is actually going to be printed on vinyl and applied to the square.
Tomorrow, June the 21st, is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Friday morning. We'll take a break. But before we do that, I want to give you something to think about. Maybe you think even you know the answer to this question. Instead of complaining about something, it's Friday. Thought we'd have a little bit of fun. And it's inspired because I walked into Jen's room on the other side of the glass over there, who's our board operator, before the show. And I caught her in the midst. She was Googling me. Okay, I'm kidding about that part. I don't know what she does in there except make sure the music gets played. But I did come across this little tidbit, and I wonder if you have ever Googled a coworker, specifically this about a coworker. According to the little tidbit I came across today, 40% of people say they have Googled this particular thing about a coworker. What do you think that thing is? Have you Googled a coworker and were you trying to find out this? Let me know what you think the answer is. See, we're going to have a little bit of fun on the show. 40% of people say they've Googled this about a coworker. Tell me what this is. 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
End of the spring, and here she comes back. Hi, 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 hi there. Them summer days, oh summer days. That's when I have most of my fun back.
Mark wanted to hear a little Hot Fun in the Summertime by Sly and the Family Stone. Excellent choice, Mark, because, of course, it was just last week that we lost Sly Stone, patriarch of the family, so to speak, the musical one, that is. We are playing today your favorite summer songs because summer officially arrives tonight at 10:42 p.m. So it is your usual All Request Friday. And because of Summer's arrival later today, we thought we would theme it, thanks to our buddy Nate. He came up with the idea. I liked it enough to say, you know what, Nate, we're going to take that idea and make it a part of the show today. So your requests, which we will play little bits of whenever we get a chance to play a request, will be summer-related songs. We also thought, I think maybe because it's got that first day of summer feeling to it, but Fridays should be a little bit of fun. So we're going to inject some fun into the show today wherever possible. And I asked you a moment ago after coming across the headline, because I was curious. I mean, have you ever Googled a coworker, period? But 40% of people say they have Googled this particular thing about a coworker. What is this thing that 40%, almost half of us, have Googled about a coworker? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. The first thing that occurred to me was something that coworker was either wearing or carrying, right? Maybe they've got, I don't know, I'm a big fan of pens. Maybe it's a pen that caught my eye. I know I sound old when I say briefcase, but I was carrying briefcases before they were cool, okay? In elementary school, I had my own little briefcase to carry around. So an accessory like that, or maybe they're wearing something that catches your attention and you're like, let's just use some time during my workday to cyber slack and Google that item of clothing that my coworker is wearing, and I can find out where they got it, how much it costs, and maybe I can get one for myself. Neither of those answers, by the way, were correct. I was not correct in my own guess when I saw the headline that 40% of people have Googled this about a coworker. If you're wondering around this radio station or this place of work, which coworker has the slipperiest fingers, not sticky fingers. This person, I can tell you with certainty, does not steal things, but he does drop them from time to time. Yesterday, I was going to the fridge. Actually, I had finished eating one of my little snacks that I eat during the show, and it was in one of those Anchor containers, the glass ones. And I've been carrying this back and forth for I don't know how long with my hard-boiled eggs. There's one of the snacks I eat during the show. And I don't know if that's offside to bring hard-boiled eggs to work, but whatever. I have my own studio space. I keep it to myself. But I was in the kitchen cleaning it up, doing the dishes, and I dropped it. And of course, it being one of those Anchor dishes, glass, it shattered everywhere. Down I go down the hall. Now I'm in the midst of a commercial break. I only have so much time to get back into the studio. There is glass all over the floor in the kitchen. But with a little help from our production supervisor, Dave, I managed to get it cleaned up. Got a dustpan, got a little broom, and was able to sweep up as much of the glass as possible. As long as nobody goes into the kitchen barefoot, and why would they while at work, everything should be fine. I don't think those pieces of glass hurt anybody. So if the question had been, which one of your coworkers is the clumsiest, I certainly would win that contest today. But when it comes to what 40% of people say they have Googled about a coworker, the answer is their salary. Imagine trying to figure out how much the person sitting next to you earns. I don't even know. I know we're supposed to have all these disclosure things, but how are you supposed to figure that out? Unless you're on the sunshine list, I've never been able to determine what my coworker makes. If you, though, go into the Google, and you can try it for yourself if you want to, Mike Farwell salary, you'll find lowest paid employee at 570 News Radio. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Hot town, summer in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty. Bend down, isn't it a pity? Doesn't seem to be a shadow in the city. All around, people looking half dead, walking on the sidewalk hotter than a match, yeah. But at night it's a different world. Go out and find a girl. Come on and dance all night. Despite the heat, it'll be alright. And babe, don't you know it's a pity the days can't be like the nights in the summer, in the city, in the summer, in the city.
Okay, you're getting the hang of things. You've certainly got the music requests down. Ron wanted to hear some Lovin' Spoonful and Summer in the City, and so he does. It's an all-request Friday, themed as we welcome summer officially tonight, just after 10:30. So your favorite summer songs. It can have summer in the title, or maybe it's just a summer tune, but you're doing a very good job on that. And we promised a little bit of fun because it's Friday, so we started the show with a not $1 million question. I used to call them $1 million questions, but then Grant called and said, do I get $1 million if I get it right? Well, no. So I thought I better be clear. It's a not $1 million question, which was 40% of us have Googled this about a coworker, and the answer is salary. And so I mentioned before the break that if you were to Google Mike Farwell's salary, you'd find that he's the lowest paid employee at 570 News Radio. Jen, who is our board operator today, says she doesn't believe that. Wait till I show you my paycheck, Jen. It's payday. Can you see it from here? Can you see my paycheck? Yeah, you can't see my paycheck. You know why? Because it's so small. That's why. And James sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. I Googled Mike Farwell's salary, and the Google told me that Mike Farwell is the most blessed NFL fan to date. Let's go, Aaron Rodgers. Very funny, James. Very funny. You see what we do on Fridays? We have fun. Apparently at my expense today. Let's go to the phones. Paul, good morning.
2 notes.
Yes, sir.
That's all it took to identify that last song.
You're very good at the Name That Tune game. Well done, sir.
Yeah, listen, I Googled you as well, and what I found was that the most overpaid, underworked employee in all of Waterloo Region.
Wait a minute. Overpaid and underworked? How do you figure?
Overpaid, underworked.
And? Is that it?
In all of Waterloo Region.
Mike, you suck.
Hey,
I should have changed that to say Paul.
Listen,
the reasons
you know what today
Farwell is stupid.
What? I'm sorry. I was playing clips. I'm sorry, Paul.
you know what today is?
June 20th, first day of summer.
The longest day of the year.
Don't. If you say, I will hang up the phone on you,
from
Paul.
Here on.
Paul.
Here on.
Paul.
The days get shorter. Winter.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say that. You know what? Oh, my goodness. Paul is nothing if not consistent. I had to cut him off because he does this to me every year. And I appreciate the consistency and the persistence that goes with it. But you know that I am a fan of this time of year, right? Where the days are long and the summer is hotter than HE double hockey sticks. I am a summer baby. I love me some summer. And Paul likes to remind me that after today, when we have the most hours and minutes and seconds of daylight that we'll have at any other time of the year, we slowly start turning back the other way. And then the season that Paul likes to celebrate is coming. I said earlier, I'll say it again. Let's see if we can't make it a good enough summer to squeeze that other season right out of the picture. Let's never have winter again. Who's with me? Yes, Paul, I know it's coming. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Myself, why should I work so hard? Sit and dream about the days to come. Half undressed, just soaking up the sun.
It is the first day of summer. Well, we'll get about 90 minutes of summer much later today as summer arrives just after 10:30. So your all request Friday includes your summer songs. And Mark and Paul from Preston, Preston Paul, can't get them mixed up, Preston Paul, wanted to hear some Sunny Days by Lighthouse on the program today. Are there sunny economic days in Canada? The subject of our economy and our future prosperity, a key part of meetings earlier this week in Kananaskis, Alberta, the G7 Summit. Jim Stanford, who is an economist and director at the Centre for Future Work, joins us to talk about an open letter that was issued on the economic benefits of public health care. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
It's not every day or week that someone or someone's, plural, takes out a full-page ad in our national newspaper, but I noticed this open letter earlier this week, and I can't help but wonder if the timing around the G7 summit, Jim, was deliberate.
Absolutely, Mike. Usually when we think about healthcare, we think of it as a cost item, right, that shows up on the provincial government's budget. And, of course, it is a cost item, an important one. But there's another side of the coin, and that's what this open letter was about. It is also a very important driver of our economy. It creates jobs, it generates GDP, it stimulates innovation and research. And so, at a moment when all the G7 leaders were there talking about what comes next for the economy, given, all the uncertainty arising from Donald Trump and so on, we thought this was a good chance to remind, all of them and our own leaders in Canada in particular, that public health care can be part of the solution as we're thinking about how our economy evolves under Donald Trump. How do you build that case, Jim, that our public health care system is part of the economic solution? Well, obviously, we are thinking about our export sector because of Trump's tariffs and the disruption that they're causing. And we're already seeing that, of course, in steel and auto and other industries that are being hurt by them. But it's important to remember that most of our economy, really close to 80% of our GDP, when you look at the data, is actually homegrown right here in Canada and stays in Canada. Things like construction, things like private services, things like public services, like healthcare, that are produced here by Canadians for Canadians and never actually cross a national border. So, Mike, we're naturally thinking about our exports and where else we could sell them, like in Europe and Asia and so on. But we shouldn't also forget this very big chunk of our economy that is homegrown, and the healthcare system is the biggest one. So, we kind of marshaled all of the economic data in this letter. 3 million Canadians work in the broader healthcare system. $200 billion worth of GDP, 500,000 new jobs created in the last decade. If it was like a private industry like mining or manufacturing that had created that much work, it would be on the front pages of the business section every day about what a great story this is. But because it's a public service, it kind of goes under the radar in terms of some of those economic benefits. Are you concerned at all about any increased privatization within our public health care system? Oh, yeah. Certainly, the letter acknowledges, Mike, our healthcare system isn't perfect, of course. A lot of Canadians, have been frustrated by wait times and so on. On the other hand, the overall cost is much less than the Americans pay for their healthcare, and we get much better results. We're healthier, we live longer, and so on. So we do talk in the letter about the benefits of doing it through a public model. A big one is you ignore or you avoid these enormous administration costs in the U.S., where you've got parallel private insurance systems keeping track of everyone and, half the time trying to deny people the care that they need in order to shave costs. We avoid that entirely. It's one of the reasons that our healthcare system costs about 6% of GDP less than it does in the United States. Another benefit of doing it publicly actually ties back to Donald Trump because most of our healthcare comes through the public system. Health costs for employers are much lower. You've got obviously supplementary benefit programs like dental and healthcare and so on that good employers pay, but they're a fraction of the size of the healthcare premiums that employers in the U.S. have to pay in the private system. There, it can add up to $20,000 a year to labor costs for a worker. So this is a way that delivering it through the public system actually enhances the competitiveness of our export industries, which is obviously something we're concerned about right now. So those are some of the benefits that come, just basic fairness as well from doing it through a public channel. You mentioned earlier, Jim, that if we made this a business story and we looked at the economic growth, it would be on the front page of that business section. So how do we ensure that this
these economic benefits continue to be reaped and that we have a functioning healthcare system that serves all well into the future?
Yeah, that's in a way, that's the big question that we were trying to answer, by pulling together this list. We got 275 economists and public health experts and others to sign the open letter to precisely bring attention to that point you made, Mike. I think to some extent maybe there's a kind of a bias in our culture, an idea that wealth is always generated in the private sector by businesses and so on. And obviously a lot of wealth is generated in the private sector. But an industry like healthcare, think about it. You invest in something like a hospital, say. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar investment. You're going to anchor a supply chain around that hospital. All of the businesses that feed in services and supplies and specialized technology to that hospital. You've got the direct jobs for people in the hospital, but you've also got indirect jobs, whether it's the supply chain or whether it's, all of the Tim Hortons restaurants and home builders and everything else that come up to serve the people who work in the hospital. Guess what? I have just described exactly the same thing that happens with an auto plant, for example, in southern Ontario. I think most people understand how an auto plant is an anchor that locates a much bigger amount of economic activity in that region, and a hospital does the same thing. So, part of our goal here, I guess, is to raise awareness about why this is important. And while we're responding to Trump and thinking about how do we help our export industries, we certainly can't ignore these important economic drivers that are right here in front of us.
Jim, really appreciate the work that you've done on this and the time on the show today. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure, sir. Thanks for having me.
Jim Stanford is an economist and the director of the Center for Future Work. That center, one of the 275 signatories on an open letter that appealed to the G7 leaders, and particularly because we are here in Canada and we're talking about an economic driver of our national economy. This open letter addresses the economic benefits of Canada's public healthcare system, including employment and economic growth, supply chains and indirect jobs that you just heard Jim allude to, innovation and research, as well as fiscal savings. That's the argument put forward about our healthcare system today and the importance of maintaining it as a public healthcare system, universal access to it. Is the healthcare system meeting your needs today? Is it serving you well? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. I like the argument put forward here because I can certainly get behind the numbers embedded within this argument. Instead of looking at it as something that we just spend on and a cost item, let's look at the economic benefits of our healthcare system. Is it, though, as it stands today, serving us well? Let me know your thoughts on The Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
He kind of marshaled all of the economic data in this letter. 3 million Canadians work in the broader healthcare system. $200 billion worth of GDP. 500,000 new jobs created in the last decade. If it was like a private industry, like mining or manufacturing, that had created that much work, it would be on the front pages of the business section every day about what a great story this is. But because it's a public service, it kind of goes under the radar in terms of some of those economic benefits.
Some Alice Cooper by request for Norma on your All Request Friday today on the program, during which we will play your favorite summertime tunes. Let us know your request. They've been coming in fast and furious. When you call to talk to us about the issues of the day, you can let Jen know what song you'd like to hear or drop me an email to Mike at 570news.com. We're celebrating summer's arrival later tonight, just after 10:30. The voice you heard as Alice Cooper's song was beginning was that of Jim Stanford, an economist and the director of the Center for Future Work. That center, along with 274 others, signed on to an open letter that was intentionally released this week as we had the G7 summit happening in Alberta. And it appeals to our nation's leaders as to the economic benefits of a public healthcare system. We have talked at some length on this show about the creeping privatization within our healthcare system, particularly here in Ontario. And the argument is being made, and you heard part of the argument in that clip from Jim Stanford, that there is tremendous economic benefit associated with our public, universally accessible healthcare system. The billions of dollars of investment, as opposed to looking at it as a cost item. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. I just thought I'd check in with Health Quality Ontario, an organization that aims to make our health system healthier. And it tells us that in April of this year, here in Ontario, on average, patients waited 2 hours to get their first assessment by a doctor in an emergency room. On average, they spent about 3.2 hours in emergency, and 72% of patients finished their emergency visit within a target time of 4 hours. Not bad. Now, if there was a high urgency need, 88% of patients finished within 8 hours, on average, spending just under 5 hours in the emergency room. The fact that they were in the emergency room for a high urgency need is because likely they don't have a family doctor. There are millions of Ontarians who do not have a family doctor. So while I can get behind the money that is spent on healthcare being viewed as investment for sure, as opposed to just looking at it as a cost item in the budget, I still want to ensure that when we are looking at that investment, we are being certain that the money is invested wisely. Is it getting to the front lines? Is it getting to patient care where obviously it needs to be directed? Because the strain on our healthcare, or as I like to call it, sick care system today, is only going to get greater as we get older, and we're doing that quite rapidly in this country. Thank you very much. And our population, while not growing as fast, has grown so much in recent years. There are more and more people, likely without those family doctors, putting more and more strain on that sick care system. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Like Dave's taste in music. He wanted to hear some Summertime Blues by none other than Rush. And your request is our command here on an All Request Friday on the program. Let us know the summer-themed song you would like to hear a little bit of, and we will work it in as we go through our show together today. Summertime, of course, brings with it thunderstorms. If you were listening to All News Mornings today with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas, you likely heard Jill Taylor, our meteorologist, talking about the possibility of thunderstorms today. I don't know how far you go for your pet, but our little Rosie, the pandemic pup, I still call her a puppy because she's got all the energy and enthusiasm and the personality of a puppy, even though she's 4 years old now. But anyway, she does not enjoy thunderstorms, not one bit. So what was it, Monday or Tuesday this week, whichever day it was earlier this week, where we had some pretty significant weather rolling through the region. I was kind of watching the skies as I was doing the show, and the minute the show was done, I bolted home as quickly as I could because I knew with the thunderstorm she would be stressed, and sure enough, she was. By the time I got home, she was pacing around and panting and just all out of sorts. So I quickly let her out, hoping it would just alleviate some of that pressure. And the poor little thing, she sat right at that back door so she could be sheltered from the rain under the soffit. It's tried to find a dry spot. So I thought, that's it. I've been reading up on this online, and I decided we're gonna try to together get over this fear of the storm. So I put on her leash and out we went in the pouring rain. And we're walking out the front door, and she hesitated. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "We're going out for a walk." So there we went out in the pouring rain. I don't know if it cured anything because we haven't had a thunderstorm since, and I'm not sure that one walk in a thunderstorm can alleviate the stress that the poor little puppy feels every time it does thunderstorm. We got soaked, and then for the things we do for our pets, our house still smells like wet dog. At least I'm not the one working from home today like my beloved. She's stuck with the wet dog smell. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. That is a song by The Alarm called Rain in the Summertime on your All Request Friday. That request for Terry, and timely because I was just talking about taking the dog out for a walk in a thunderstorm earlier this week, hoping to alleviate some of her anxiety. Also appropriate because the band is The Alarm, and many of us, I think understandably, are sounding an alarm over the level of violence we have seen from young people in our community. This, of course, extends beyond the region of Waterloo, but just in the past week, a couple of high-profile incidents involving teenagers and guns. Adam Ellis is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Legal Studies at the University of Waterloo, joins us to talk about it. And Adam, in one case, we had a young person firing a shot down a trail. Seems more mischievous to me than anything else. But in the other case, a 13-year-old boy, as an example, seemingly using a gun in an effort to intimidate a group that he had, I don't know, beef or conflict with, whatever the case may be. When you hear stories like this, and given your area of research, what factors do you think might be contributing to young people engaging in behaviors like this?
So just kind of for context, my work primarily focuses on memory, how young people grow up, and the circumstances such as trauma and the impact of society on them and their behaviors. So a lot of people kind of start from the position, they start from the criminal event or the crime. And we don't look backwards to think about what led up to those things. And trauma provides a good framework for us to understand young people's stories and why they got to where they got. So to answer your question, I guess every individual's experience would be different and the reasons therefore. But I guess from a thematic standpoint, there are some general larger themes that have emerged, not just through my research, but also from my own lived experience in the streets. So things such as, so at the macro level, things such as race and racism, marginalization, poverty, lack of opportunities, push out from education systems. At the community level, young people who grew up in concentrated poverty, who grew up in Toronto places such as community housing, etc., where buildings are not taken care of, where there are no support measures, where recreational leisure activities are taken away from them, especially young people growing up in very under-resourced communities. And we also have to frame this from kind of the standpoint of, we often talk about young people's behaviors and their externalization of violence, but we don't talk about kind of all the violence that happened to them through their lives, which can be compartmentalized within all of these kind of themes also. So, when we think about what about the systemic violence they experience, what police violence they experience, community violence, violence within the schools, bullying, all of these things are kind of layers upon layers upon layers of trauma, and they develop this memory and viewpoint of society where they start pushing back and resisting. And sometimes that result can result in violence at the end of the day.
Given how young some of these youth are, we're talking, in some cases 13 years of age, what role does the family unit play in this then, or perhaps the absence of one?
Yeah, I mean, family can again be part of that trauma matrix, is part of the risk factors. So we know from research that strong family, and family can be a general term. It doesn't have to be mom and dad. It could be aunts, uncles, extended family, etc. Young people with strong families and good support systems usually tend to navigate even in the worst of circumstances. There's a smaller group, a smaller cohort of young people who don't have any of that and find the streets and people in the streets to be kind of their mentors and families and brotherhood or sisterhood. And this is where they start ending up in circumstances like underground drug markets or being lured into, street organizations or mainstream terms, gangs, etc., where they're easier to be manipulated. So, to answer your question, family plays a very important part.
So, knowing what we know then, and when we see these behaviors and have this research that attempts to explain why these behaviors are manifesting in the way that they are, what can we do about it? What's the call to action for us here?
So I think the first thing is, I find a lot of people, I do a lot of workshops and a lot of talks, and you know, the I think the first core thing is to admit that this is super complex and it can't be, figured out in one radio show or one workshop or one symposium or one large conference with a whole bunch of police leading it, right? There's a lot of layers to this, especially if you take a trauma-informed perspective to it. Like I said, there's things that are happening to young people from a systems level, from a macro standpoint. There's things happening in their community that are out of their control. And then that all trickles down to how they see life and how they live life and the things that they have to navigate. And, you know, um, I'm not a pessimist. I'd like to be an optimist in this, but all of those pieces have to be addressed in order for young people to be uplifted and to survive, right? Um, I remember years ago that there was a report floating around the root causes of violence, and in that report there was X number of recommendations, and even in that report they had said that if we don't take care of all these recommendations, it all falls apart. So I feel like governments have taken a band-aid solution to the issues of violence or youth crime, and is definitely never resourced to how it's supposed to be. And That's why kind of these things repeat every decade. We've been having the same conversation for 40 plus years, and very little has changed. If anything, things have gotten a bit worse because we've moved from fist fights to knife fights to gunfights, right? Social media has propelled young people into a different space, making access to each other even easier. So bullying and beefs that are taking place online happen at a way faster rate than they did in the past. You can find somebody a lot faster. So, adding even that element, just the social media piece to all this, is another whole layer that's also super complex in the work through. But, people on the ground are trying to do this work. I know some great organizations that are trying to engage and connect with young people. And then you have some levels of government that want to pull back and cut things, and you want to cut education programs, and you want to cut, pathways and access from high school to post-secondary education. We see, the dismantling of the college education system, which was a huge part of, marginalized young people who may have not done well in STEM and all these things in grade school, but are given a second opportunity to also make it. That's a pathway that I took through college. And we're seeing that become underfunded and having issues. So if you're going to constantly pull away and take away things and just under-resourced society, then you're going to end up with young people who are going to push back and really, at the end of the day, vomit their trauma onto the rest of society. And that may come in the form of violence. It may come in the form of a robbery. It may come in the form of stealing cars. It may come in the form of racing. Like, these are all, I guess society sees them as, delinquent or abnormal behaviors, but from my experience, these are behaviors that they should be doing as a result of all the things that have been happening to them throughout their lives. It's just some young people get criminalized for it where others don't. So,
Adam, it's great to get your perspective on this for the show. Thank you very much for making time to join us.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Adam Ellis is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Legal Studies at the University of Waterloo. Shares in-depth analysis of what his research has taught him. And I think these are things that we have heard before. And I wonder, from your perspective, where it is you feel as though we are letting down our kids. If, in fact, we agree that we're letting them down. I think we are. I mean, if a 13-year-old is finding their way to get their hands on a gun, we have failed that child somewhere between birth and 12 years of age, right? I think so. But your thoughts always welcome on the show. Where are we failing our kids? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
When we think about the systemic violence they experience, what police violence they experience, community violence, violence within the schools, bullying, all these things are kind of layers upon layers upon layers of trauma. And they develop this memory and viewpoint of society where they start pushing back and resisting. And sometimes that can result in violence at the end of the day.
Chicago by request for Michael on this All Request Friday. As you just heard the voice of Adam Ellis, an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Legal Studies at the University of Waterloo, who joined us to talk about the increasing incidents we are seeing where young people are using firearms. In one recent case, in the commission of an attempt to intimidate some other youth that he was in conflict with. He's been arrested, he's been charged, and here we are kind of dealing with the aftermath. And Adam shared with us what his research has taught him insofar as the factors leading young people to becoming engaged in behaviors like this. And I think we've heard similar statements, similar narratives from academics in the past. And I believe this. I firmly believe this. But the question I then have is, if we know this is a likely result, what are we doing before our kids turn 13 or 12 or whatever, before the time they get their hands on a firearm and use it to intimidate some other youth that they're in conflict with? And what kind of conflict are we having at 13 years of age, for crying out loud? I'll grant you that there was a time in my life where it was, I'll see you in the schoolyard after the final bell. I get that stuff, but holy moly. It seems to have gone from, sticks and stones will break my bones to I'll pop a cap in your you-know-what. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Where do you feel as though it is we are failing our kids? Chris sends an email to Mike at 570news.com, says, removal of police or school resource officers from schools has had a direct correlation to the rise of youth violence, a statistical fact. I'm not sure, Chris, that is a direct correlation. Correlation does not equal causation. I agree that it seems as though we are seeing more violence at our schools, but I don't think it's just because school resource officers have been removed. I think there are many, many more factors at play. Would the return of school resource officers in any way change that? Perhaps. And we might just find out, because I shared with you on this show a couple of weeks ago, our education minister, Paul Calandra, and some pretty strong language around the behaviors and actions of school boards across this province, how tightly monitored, how closely monitored they will be when it comes to any financial irregularities, for example, and school resource officers, where available, will be reinstated to schools, said the education minister. We'll see how that plays out here. But when it comes to the question that I was asking and where it is we're failing our kids, I acknowledge this is going to sound as old school as it gets, and you can criticize me for that if you like, but I do subscribe to the whole idea of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I recognize that kids have been getting into trouble, mischief, disobeying the rules, breaking the rules since time immemorial. Totally get that. But as I said a moment ago, we seem to have gone from, meet me in the schoolyard after the final bell to I'll meet you in this dark alley or wherever on this trail, and I'm going to be bringing a firearm in hopes that you only bring a knife or something like that. It seems to certainly have escalated. But where I think that we are failing our kids is with a complete and utter lack of structure. There have to be boundaries. It's that simple. And I'm not talking, super strict. I grew up in a pretty strict household, I will admit. I don't know that it has to be as strict, but I think we have allowed things to get far too loose. In our efforts to be less strict, we have gotten far too loose. And absent the structure, absent the understanding of the boundaries that exist and the consequences that come from crossing those boundaries. And I don't mean, even a smack on the derriere. I'm not talking about corporal punishment and spanking and all of these things, but there has to be a consequence for going outside the lines. And I don't feel as though we are giving our kids that structure anymore today. And if it's something as simple as not having a smartphone or a video game privilege taken away for a length of time because you broke the rules, I think it manifests itself into all kinds of things later, where young people grow up with the idea that there are no consequences for their misbehavior. I think we're missing out on structure. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Andrew, my apologies. In my efforts to make a point of my own, I've run us tragically short of time. Remember, noon to 1, Free Phones Friday, where we open the phone lines to hear your perspectives, maybe on things we talked about on the show today. So if between 12 and 1 you'd like to call back and let us know where you think we've failed our kids these days, I'm more than happy to hear from you then. Right now, I have to get you to the 570 News Center for an update, and then We check in with Waterloo Region sports and entertainment for WRSE Weekly here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Summer loving had me a blast. Summer loving happened so fast. I met a girl crazy for me. Met a boy cute as can be. Summer days drifting away to other summer nights. Tell me more, did you get very far? Tell me more, like does he have a car?
John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John. I don't need to tell you that because this song, if I go back to what Paul from Preston was saying earlier, I'm sure he named it and you named it in about 2 notes, some summer nights from the soundtrack of the movie Grease, as we play your summer favorites here on your All Request Friday. That one for Suzanne. Summer officially arrives tonight, 10:42, 43, just after 10:30 p.m. Let's just put it that way. And the boys of summer at Jack Couch Park are well underway with their inter-county baseball season. The Kitchener Panthers, you'll get to catch them at home this weekend. They are home Sunday to Guelph and tomorrow to Hamilton, also on the road tonight in Hamilton. And Shanif Hirani, who is the general manager of your Kitchener Panthers, joins us for WRSE, Waterloo Region Sports and Entertainment Weekly. Shanif, good morning.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks. How about you?
Doing okay.
Good. Team's struggling a bit. 4 losses in a row. What's gone wrong?
Yes. Honestly, for us, it's been our pitching to start. We've been putting ourselves behind the 8 ball early in games. Last night, we made a little bit of a run late to make things interesting, but we just need to get off to a better start in these games.
And the offense, maybe the bats have gone a little bit quiet, Shanif. I'm just looking back over those 4 games and only 8 runs scored over that. We know in inter-county ball, you usually need a few more than that.
You do, especially at our field where the ball's flying out pretty easily. We need to wake them up, but there were some signs last night, especially later in the game, that things are starting to turn the corner again. So we get to get back at it tonight.
What are those signs that you're seeing? You mentioned, got a little bit of a push late to make the game more interesting. What signs are you seeing?
For me, it was the quality of the at-bat and the quality of the contact. Guys were starting to hit the ball a little bit harder, a little bit more on the barrel, which is exactly what we're looking for. Hard hit balls result in more hits. And we also put one out yesterday late in the game, and one of our players that was struggling, it was a big swing for him to get things back on track. So he's going to be a big part of our lineup, Yosuke Fuji, our third baseman. So getting him back on track would be huge for us.
You mentioned you've got Hamilton again tonight. You're in Hamilton at Bernie Arbor Memorial Stadium for that game, and then home both Saturday and Sunday against the Cardinals and the Royals. What can we expect at Jack Couch this weekend?
Yes, so tomorrow night, it's a different start time. We're a 7 p.m. start time on a Saturday night. Kids, anyone under 18 gets in free for tomorrow night's game. And then on Sunday, we take on Guelph at our typical 2 p.m. time. And we're welcoming a lot of minor baseball teams as well as Challenger Baseball Kitchener. So it should be a great day at the park.
Challenger Baseball, I absolutely love that initiative here in town and all the hardworking folks behind it. It's great. And you mentioned for Saturday night's game, a 7 o'clock start, which is not typical, but anyone under the age of 18 getting in free, bringing those minor league teams in on Sunday, sounds like an effort certainly to attract a younger audience to the ballpark, Shanif.
For sure. It was something when I was a young kid playing baseball in Kitchener. I know I always wanted to go to Panthers games and see what those players look like at that next level and something they could aspire to be. So we want to do whatever we can to get as many kids in the ballpark and see what they could achieve. And hopefully one day they will end up putting on our uniform.
I remember doing that too, and I have to admit, I'll confess here, I was kind of a bad fan because after a couple of innings, my buddy and I would go out behind the bleachers there and play catch for a little bit. As the game was going on, I should have been paying more attention.
I did the same thing as a kid, but there's lots of room. We know it's going to be a hot one on Sunday, so need to move around and find some shade. But there's definitely lots to do for the kids. And after the game again on Sunday, it's Junior Panther Sunday, so they can also run the bases as well and then get autographs and photos with our players after the game.
You talked about on Sunday those minor teams that you'll be hosting as well. What's that relationship like, Shinif, between the Kitchener Panthers in the Inter-County League and the minor teams that we have playing around the region?
So far, in my experience, it's been great. We have, at every game, we get a lot of Kitchener minor baseball players, Waterloo minor baseball players, and throughout everyone I've talked to throughout the community or people who run those teams, they all want to come out and support us, and we want to do what we can to support them as well. So however we can connect our players with the future of baseball around here, we want to take advantage of.
All right. Keep up that great work, and let's get back on track this weekend. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Shinif Hirani is the general manager of the Kitchener Panthers, struggling a little bit of late. It starts with starting pitching, according to the GM. 4 losses in a row, but a chance to get back on track tonight in Hamilton. And then the Cardinals come into Kitchener for a Saturday night game. It's a 7 o'clock start. Anyone under the age of 18 gets in for free. And on Sunday afternoon, the Guelph Royals are here at Jack Couch Park. That'll be the traditional 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon start. The Panthers are trending just ahead of the Royals in the standings, so that'll be a big one for sure. But after this 4-game losing skid, they've dropped to 7th, the Panthers have. They're 7 games back of the league-leading Welland Jackfish. So there is no better time than the present for the Kitchener Panthers to get back on track. You can get tickets right at the gate when you walk up or go online to KitchenerPanthers.com. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're approaching the halfway point of the show. Some headlines at the halfway point. Who's up for that idea? Have you ever wondered how much it might cost to clean up litter, but specifically the litter that comes from gum on the streets of a city? The number surprised me. It might surprise you. And is this the new indie band that will be appearing at a bar in Guelph this weekend? Or we'll get to that with your halfway point headlines coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
See what you can find.
Deborah wanted to hear some Mungo Jerry on the show today, and why not? Because we are taking your summer-themed requests all day here on the show. It's an all-request Friday, and that, of course, is in the summertime. As we are approaching the midway point of our show, halfway headlines, some things that I think that you might be interested in, just some headlines that I came across that seemed at least interesting to me. Hopefully you feel similarly. A couple of things coming up at councils next week. At Regional Council on Wednesday, a presentation will be made from the bridge keepers of Woolwich Township. West Montrose Covered Bridge. I know you know it well. It has been given a heritage designation for a reason. There is work underway. We've talked about it on the show before. To ensure the structural integrity and long life of that bridge. This probably won't surprise you either. It's getting a hell of a lot more expensive. So Regional Council will consider that next week. In beautiful Wellesley Township, they will be considering new regulations around fireworks in the township. Stop me if you've heard that one before. which would or could, the recommendation suggests, prohibiting and or limiting the sale of fireworks within the township to bricks and mortar sites only, to eliminate pop-up sales. So that's something that Wellesley Township Council will consider next week. Couple of things from across this beautiful country of ours that caught my attention, and I think they have implications locally, so I thought I would share. One comes from the capital of British Columbia and Victoria, where City Council has endorsed a new plan to address homelessness, addiction, and mental illness. Now, this came after a committee was struck with experts from a variety of sectors, and it follows a survey from the Downtown Victoria Business Association that suggested businesses had reached a tipping point when it comes to the impacts that homelessness, addiction, and mental health issues were having on the downtown area and their businesses, meaning many wouldn't survive without some sort of effort put into place to reduce the amount of street disorder, such as open drug use, camping in doorways and on sidewalks, and repeat criminal activity. This sounds very similar to challenges we've talked about in downtown Kitchener, right? And now they have got a new report following the consultation with this panel of experts that includes, among other things, the feasibility of small-scale tiny homes for the unhoused, increasing funding to maintain the cleanliness of public spaces, supporting local businesses with graffiti removal, and creating more public amenities such as microplazas and benches. But this is in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, grappling with very similar issues, and after consultation with dozens of experts, this is where they land. Little closer to home, here in Ontario, the beautiful city of Kingston. And this is again applicable, I think, to the city of Kitchener, because in Kingston, Indian Road could soon get a new name. Council in Kingston voted 7-3 earlier this week to rename the residential street, even though residents said, please don't do this. It's going to be costly, and it doesn't need to happen. This is the same city, Kingston, that changed the name of Sir John A. What was it called? Sir John A.'s Public House. It's now just the Public House, a bar in Kingston, because, you know, you couldn't have the name Sir John A. Macdonald associated with it anymore, even though that's where his law office was way back when. Anyway, we have an Indian Road in Kitchener. Despite some applications to have the city of Kitchener rename Indian Road, the city of Kitchener is not yet doing that. But in Kingston, they are. And when I came across it, I thought, well, that's interesting, to say the least, and maybe somewhat applicable, because we have an Indian Road right here in Kitchener. And finally, how about this from City Council in Cambridge? But not that Cambridge here in the region of Waterloo, but over in the UK, that Cambridge. I couldn't believe how much money it cost us to clean up this particular problem. The problem is chewing gum littered onto the streets. And in Cambridge, UK, City Council is putting a near $100,000 plan. It's £21,000, about 80 grand Canadian, to remove chewing gum from the streets. I'm not joking. In order to get this grant of £21,000, Cambridge City Council, Cambridge, UK, applied successfully to the, are you ready for it, Chewing Gum Task Force. This is a thing. I don't make any of this up. There is a chewing gum task force in the UK that grants out this money so that gum can be cleaned off pavements and prevent it from being littered again. This chewing gum task force was established by DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and it's run by an environmental charity. The Chewing Gum Task Force grant scheme is open to councils across the United Kingdom that wish to clean up gum in their local areas. How much do you think it costs to clean up all of the gum that gets littered onto the roads and streets in the UK? Estimates suggest the annual cleanup cost is around £7 million. That's almost $14 million Canadian. £7 million. Chewing gum found on 77% of England's streets and 99% of retail sites stained with the litter of chewing gum. A £7 million, near $14 million Canadian problem. When I see a price tag like that, all I can say is, hubba bubba. This is the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Hip, hip. Hip, hip. Hip, hip. Hip, hip. When you're on a holiday, you can't find the words to say all the things that come to you, and I wanna feel it too. On an island in the sun.
The guy who said you should make all Request Friday about summer songs. Nathan wanted to hear Island in the Sun from Weezer, and so there you go, Nate Dogg. Corey sends an email to Mike at 570news.com following our headlines near the halfway point of the show about the chewing gum problem in the UK. He says Corey's email to Mike at 570news.com. Due to the same issues that the UK is facing with cleaning up chewing gum is illegal in Singapore. And that's the cleanest city I've ever visited. There you go. Says, listen, Corey, I know it's a sticky problem, to be sure. Just one more quick one for you. Emphasis on the headline here. But in Guelph, police have arrested a man after they were called to an address just outside the downtown where the person making the call showed security video which depicted a man walking around the property in the very early hours of the day, masturbating. There were other videos of the same man on multiple occasions entering the property overnight and pulling down his pants. Police in Guelph were able to identify this man based on previous interactions. A 29-year-old Guelph man has now been arrested. But perhaps the best part of it all, the entire story, was the headline. Guelph police arrest wandering masturbator. Is that a headline in an online newspaper? Or are the wandering masturbators opening at an indie rock bar near you this weekend? The new punk band? What? You think it. I say it. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
See the curtains hanging in the window in the evening on a Friday night. Little light is shining through the window, lets me know everything's alright. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind.
Summer does officially arrive later today, so we're playing your favorite summer tunes as part of All Request Friday on the show. George wanted to hear some Seals and Crofts and Summer Breeze, so there you go, George. Thanks for the request. Fridays, of course, between 11 and noon mean our Friday for Roundtable, where we get some different perspectives on the big stories of the week. And nice to see today Janice Jim with us, who's the Vice President of Cycle Waterloo Region. Janice, good morning.
Good morning.
And Julie Callflesh is with us as well, Director of Fundraising and Communications for Sanguine Health Centre. Julie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We are hoping to see Caitlin Kilgore, the co-owner of Dream Team Video Productions, any moment now. But she's in Tavistock or someplace out there. They got the gerbil running around the wheel there to try to get the internet going. But it'll be okay. We hope to hear from Caitlin soon. But we have plenty to talk about and great perspectives to talk about it with. So, Janice, let's start with you on renovictions, which was a story in the city of Kitchener this week. And personally, I get frustrated that this is a story in the city of Kitchener because I don't think it's the municipality's job. I think the province is abdicating its duties here, but enough from me. What do you think about renovictions and renoviction bylaws? Should municipalities be in the business of working on this problem?
Definitely agree that it should be a provincial issue, but they're not doing any work on it. So someone has to step in, and it's up to the municipalities. And I think I agree with the vote and Kitchener's decision. It has worked in other cities. It's early. Hamilton just adopted theirs, but they have early stats that show that 99% reduction in the number of N13s, which is the renoviction notices. So I think that's a sign that it's working. And, people are in tough situations with housing. And the city needs to help do what they can to help people living in the region.
Julie, what's your take on renovictions and where it fits under a municipality's purview, for example?
Similar to Janice, I think it should be handled by the province. This is a provincial responsibility, but when it comes to housing, and in particular affordable housing, the province has kind of washed their hands of this since the 90s. And that's why we're in a lot of the situations we're in now. And we've seen this bizarre shift in rent just skyrocketing in the last few years since COVID. I own a rental unit and was astonished to see how much we could get for that unit now compared to 5 years ago, which, for us was, you have that moral question as well. Do we want to charge the maximum knowing that there's a housing crisis? So, there's a lot going on in this space for sure. The province needs to provide oversight to this, because what happens when municipalities step forward and make their own rules, although that is something that we want to see them advocating and we want to see them doing something, especially if nobody else is, it creates an unevenness across the province. And then we end up with people who maybe decide to not invest in Waterloo and to go somewhere else where they can still be free to, renovict people at their will. So I think that there is a strong need for conversation and education around this. This is definitely contributing to the housing and homelessness crisis. And so we can't continue as we are. And I appreciate any municipality that steps up to do something about it. But, we need provincial leadership on this as well.
We absolutely do. And if I can just press a little further without getting too personal, Julie, but since you mentioned that you have a rental unit and it becomes that moral question, right? You know full well that you could rent it out for more than you are probably currently renting it out for. So I know the Call Flesh is a little bit, I know there's good people there in the Call Flesh home, Julie, but it makes me wonder, and I asked this question earlier in the week, is it a municipality's job to essentially legislate morality here? Is that what we're doing?
I was thinking about this when I was kind of reflecting on this article that it was sent over to us, and I don't know. I really don't know what the answer is there. And I would say that we still charged quite a bit for rent. It was much lower than what the individual was seeing in other similar places, and they were extremely happy, and it was sort of a friend of a friend. But yeah, prior to that, we had family members living in there, and we were not charging market value by any stretch, and for good reason. So I think that it's that question of morality and how much ownership do we take over helping our neighbors. And I certainly believe that is something that aligns with us personally in my household. But it's tricky when you see like, oh my gosh, we could be getting XYZ for this rental unit. I have expenses and things. Um, so yeah, I don't know what the answer is there, but it's certainly something that we contemplated when we moved away from having family living there and back into the market. And I think that there needs to be a reboot on affordable housing. And so, if we were to be in a place where we had adequate affordable housing or subsidies so people could access places wherever they may be, um, then I think like that's really where the controls and the responsibility lies, is that there needs to be that oversight, and that's the province.
And one of the other challenges, of course, Julie, is when it comes time that something does need to be done at that rental property, it ain't getting any less expensive to have that work done if you're not, for example, doing it yourself, or even the cost of materials, which means your costs as a landlord are also escalating here.
Yeah, and we did a renovation between our family members moving out and having our new tenants, and we shouldered that because it's an investment for us, and we prosper from that in the end. Having a townhouse, we're lucky to be able to have that, and so I think that for us it didn't come to a place where we wanted to directly have that be the burden of the tenants. We're taking that on and paying it over time because it's a good investment. But yeah, I mean, it's tough out there right now. People can't afford, whether you're a landlord and you're trying to make extra money and that is your income, or you're someone who's trying to find a roof to put over your family's head. We have an affordability crisis that far extends beyond the rent evictions issue and other things that we desperately need to start addressing. And so having these conversations is really important. And I think contemplating that morality piece is also a good thing to do.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that is the exact issue. I mean, from both sides of it that we're seeing. And if I had the opportunity, the Farwells would be identical landlords to the Callfleshes. And I think most situations probably are like that, but we do have those unscrupulous behaviors happening, which is why we have bylaws like this and conversations like this. And Janice, if I can just throw it back your way, because we seem to agree here that in absence of action by the province, yes, the municipalities are stepping up, like Hamilton has, like London has, Toronto now, Kitchener, for example. But at some point, don't we, and I think this will tie into our next conversation, because we want infrastructure for people walking and biking. We need all sorts of things. Cities are already crying poor. How much more can they be expected to take on?
Yeah, this is right. The number one thing that could help the situation right now is rent control. The Ford government got rid of rent control for buildings occupied after 2018. That's the number one thing they could bring back that could help a lot of people right away, and it won't affect landlords' investments that much because they are allowed to increase the rent by the guidelines set by the Landlord-Tenant Board every year, and that's tied to inflation as well. So, I'm hearing a lot of stories about people occupying the new buildings, and the landlord decides to raise the rent 10, 20%. And, where are these people supposed to go? And that adds to the crisis. So, yeah, the province needs to step up. But in the meanwhile, the cities, I'm glad they're stepping in to help plug the hole a little bit. The N13s is not the whole piece of the puzzle, but it's one piece of it that, landlords are taking advantage of to make more money.
I may borrow that if you don't mind. Where the province fails to step up, the cities will step in. I like the phrasing there. Janice Jim and Julie Callflesh with us on the Friday 4 Roundtable this morning. A quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about all of those near misses in intersections across this country, including right here in the region of Waterloo. How do we make these intersections safer? This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
It was 1989, my thoughts were short, my hair was long. Caught somewhere between a boy and man. She was 17 and she was far from in between. It was summertime in northern Michigan.
You know, this guy was one of my least favorite artists even before he became besties with Donald Trump. But that's okay. It's your request on this All Request Friday. Some summer tunes. And Tom wanted to hear All Summer Long by Kid Rock. Julie Callflesh, Janice Chim with us on our Friday 4 roundtable recap of the week's big stories this week. And Julie, I'll start with you on the near misses we've been hearing about thanks to the CAA's 7-month study. At intersections across this country, more than 600,000 of these near misses at intersections. What can we do to make things safer out there?
Well, it's great that we're collecting data and that these kinds of reports exist. I think it's important to look at things like visibility and signage, even markings on the roads. Like, I think that anytime we talk about that, though, there is a cost to it. And I am going back to our previous point, municipalities are struggling, so it's hard to keep up on all this stuff. I saw a big, long discussion on our neighborhood Facebook page about the road near our house, and it is a mess. So you start to see this time of year things are growing out over signs, and it's hard to see around corners. You got more people on bikes. It's a really dangerous time, and so that's where I always like to go to, looking at public awareness. And when I say that, I also kind of internally cringe because it's so difficult to educate the public right now. There's so much information out there, but I do think it's important that we continue to provide resources for folks so that they are reminded about how to use different types of intersections. We have a lot of roundabouts in our region, and they can be really helpful, but people have to use them in the right way. And I also think, I was reflecting on a conversation I had with someone that I work with who moved to Bamberg, actually, from Toronto, and was so shocked at how fast people drive in Waterloo Region, which kind of set me back. I thought, really, like, you're coming from Toronto, it always feels so chaotic there. But ever since he made that comment to me, I've really noticed that people drive very fast in this region. And, roads that are designated, 50, like Westmount, often people are traveling like 80, 90 kilometers an hour. And so it's harder to react in traffic situations when you're going that far over the speed limit. So I think, I don't know, maybe people can reflect on that themselves. I was stunned when he said it, but I have really noticed that. And I think that has a huge impact on these near misses.
It's a great point and a great observation. And of course, he couldn't see speeders in Toronto because nobody can actually drive there. It's always
right. So true.
Janice, as the VP of Cycle Waterloo Region, I'm sure you have a harrowing tale or two to tell.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with all the technology in the cars now, distracted driving is a much bigger issue. The stats in the study definitely are a wake-up call for any region and city. I think the one thing that can fix it is engineering, better engineered intersections, like the article suggests, banning right turns on red, because I was shocked at how many incidents are just from simply cars making right-hand turns. And now that I think about it, I understand, because a lot of the cars don't look before they turn. They just look at the light and they assume, and then that's what happens. And left-hand turns. So engineering can go a long way to fixing. And I think the region and the cities are doing a great job with it so far, with all the bike lanes and the better infrastructure. but there's a lot more city planning engineering solutions that could be done, like daylighting, which is taking away a parking space near intersections for better visibility. And then the speed cameras. I know that's been a little bit controversial, but it's ridiculous when I hear that this speed camera has to be suspended because it's giving out too many tickets. Like, that's actually happened. And so isn't that the entire point of the speed camera? Like Julie said, people drive incredibly fast in the region, and they complain when there's a speed camera in school zones and there's speed cameras in enforcement. But that's the whole point. Safer driving, less speed, stick to the speed limit. And the other thing is that cars are so much bigger and heavier now. Any incident and impact leads to way more serious and catastrophic injuries for pedestrians and cyclists. If you look at the stats of how big cars have gotten, in the last 20, 30 years, everyone's driving an SUV. Electric cars are incredibly heavy. If you get hit by one of those, it causes a lot more injuries. So those are a lot of things to think about. But I think the cities, every time they fix up an intersection, they're moving in the right direction with better planning and engineering.
I could certainly get behind the ban on right turns on reds. Janice, Jim, Julie Callflesh with us on the Friday 4 Roundtable. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, we certainly will feel hot these next several days as a summer heat wave arrives in the region. And Tom wanted to hear the Merrymen and Hot, an all request Friday. That's actually back-to-back requests by guys named Tom. Maybe we should try that some week. All request Friday, but only if your name is Tom can you request a song. We're playing our summer favorites on All Request Friday. And, of course, engaging in conversation, getting some different perspectives on the week's big stories with our Friday 4 Roundtable. Janice Jim, who's the Vice President of Cycle Waterloo Region, is here, as is Julie Callflesh, who's the Director of Fundraising and Communications for Sanguine Health Centre. Janice, I'll start with you on this one. What a week for Ontario Premier Doug Ford, huh? Oh, he's apologizing for his hat in hand comment to our Indigenous communities. And even before that, he went on an unscripted, I'll stop short of saying unhinged, rant about our justice system. I use the term loosely, but he's upset. He wants bail reform. And then he snuck in this little gem about a castle law that Ontario Premier Doug Ford thinks we need here in Canada, like the United States. In a nutshell, that means you can protect your property and those living within that home or on that property with lethal force if necessary. Janice, what do you think? Do we need a castle law here in Canada?
Oh boy, hell no. I mean, look at we're not the U.S. Look at the U.S. and there are problems with gun control and gun violence, and then the stand your ground laws. How many cases has there been where there's been teenagers that got lost, they knocked on someone's door and they were shot and killed, and legally the person wasn't prosecuted. We don't need that kind of violence and situations in Canada. I think right now there's a reasonable amount of force that you can use to defend your property and your family. And what Ford is proposing is ridiculous. It's another one of his rants, I guess. But as a premier, you should watch your words. He shouldn't be mentioning things like that. And also all the comments about the judicial system. The number one way he could fix it is by staffing the courthouse, with enough staff and judges. The legal system is backlogged. That's why everyone's getting out on bail. He should be working with the Ontario, legislative branch to make sure the courts are staffed and all the appointments are made. And also he should be pressuring the federal government to work with them to make sure, like I said, the staffing issues, and there's a lot of issues with the actual courthouse building. They renovated it, but there's still a lot of infrastructure issues with that building. So if he wants to put things in the right direction, that what needs to be fixed. Instead, he just goes on these rants instead of fixing things where it needs to be done.
I'm glad you brought up the point of the laws that do exist already in Canada, because I think that gets lost when it comes to protecting our property, because I think that gets lost in this conversation. And really, we have under the law the right to protect property, but it stops short of, like the castle law in the United States, the death of the person intruding on that property. So I think that is important to remember here. And the story that got Doug Ford fired up, Janice, was, of course, about a man in the Toronto area whose car was being stolen or in the process of being stolen, and he fired some warning shots from his home, and he has been charged. What do you make of the outcome there?
Well, first of all, is it the legal use of a firearm? Is he allowed to use it? And I think not. That's what the law says. And is he a legal owner of the firearm? We have very strict firearm control laws in Canada just to stop situations like this. So there's no excuse there. You're defending a car. You shouldn't be putting other people's lives at risk. And that's not your job. That's the police department's job. Like, this is why we have the laws in place.
All right, Julie, I'll swing it over to you, starting on the idea of a castle law here in Canada.
Oh boy. So no, we do not want to be like our neighbors. And I was very concerned. I watched the video of his rant, and it was very Americanized, and even attacking judges that don't make decisions that he agrees with, is concerning to me, because that's what we're seeing right now in the States. And as Janice pointed out, there's a lot of reasons why judges do what they do. And part of that is the broken system itself and the need to put more investment into that. So, obviously at the end of the day, I don't want to see people who are dangerous out on the streets. I'd like to, see less people selling dangerous supply out on the streets. But without going into my own rant, there are other ways to deal with that as well. So, some things that I wanted to add to what Janice said, the teenagers that got lost in neighborhoods, the Uber drivers who, went to the wrong house and found themselves dead, also were, in most cases, if not all, racialized. So when we change our gun laws, and we have good gun laws here in Canada, we also put at risk folks that are marginalized and racialized. And so we certainly don't want to step into that as well. It also can create, fabricate escalation. So now all of a sudden people, because this law has changed, there then creates this belief that there is a greater threat. And then you have more people jumping the gun, for lack of a better way to say that, and taking matters into their own hands. And we don't want to see that either. So, I think this would be a horrible idea. And, even Ford, I felt like at points, was he trying to walk back what he was saying while he was saying it? Like he said, well, don't actually go and shoot the gun in the air. But it was, there's a lot more things that can be done to get at the root causes of the increase in crime, to get at the root causes of, all the things that we are seeing happen. And we need policymakers who are going to take a look at that and not put these Band-Aid solutions on. I'd be curious to know how many people in the US have used the castle law in a way that was actually legitimately, they were in a dangerous situation, that they were under threat. I would guess very little. I think that these are folks who are, shooting up people because they got on their property in error, and not because they were actually a threat. And so I think we definitely do not need this. This is not a Canadian way of doing business.
When you talk about the system as it is today being broken, and I think you were, in part at least, alluding to Janice's comment about the underfunding provincially, et cetera. But where do you see the cracks, so to speak, in the system?
Well, I think that we have known for a long time that there are a lot of people in jail who don't belong there. The jails aren't being used in the right way. And, you know, I guess when I make that comment about the system, I'm concerned about some of the things that are coming down the pipes as well. Bill 6 and Bill 10, which will actually further strain the justice system, where, we're looking at criminalizing homelessness. So, I mean, being homeless is not a crime, certainly not from the individual. It's, anyway, I won't get on my soapbox, but I think that, there hasn't been enough money invested in it, from infrastructure to the actual, resources and staff working. I don't know if there's been enough research and evidence into what is working and what isn't. And, I think that there are a lot of people who are in prison right now that we would be served better as taxpayers to not have them in there. So it's a very costly machine. But I also think that there is a desire for privatization with this particular government. And so, he will be an opportunist. If there is a story out there where someone could have defended themselves or did defend themselves and ended up being criminally charged, like, he's always using these stories to weave this perspective of safety. A lot of our political leaders are doing that right now in order to kind of gain leverage into some sort of bylaw or system that they want to change. Are we really as unsafe as they're saying? I don't know. And I think that there needs to be a broader look at why these things are happening.
Julie Callflesh and Janice Jim are with us on the Friday 4 Roundtable this morning. We're going to keep our focus on the Premier. Maybe he was ranting because somewhere deep down he was upset about the new documentary that's dropped on Netflix this week. We'll talk about that as we continue our Friday 4 Roundtable discussion on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Like I knew that you would come to me and we'd run away with all our dreams. Don't you think that I'd prepare a bit and try to make it all complete? To run away, it's not the kind of thing that I do in a normal day. But it's so cool that we're together and we're smiling, drinking soda. I want to jump in a lake.
All right, Dan, you got your summer request for Soda by Gob here on your All Request Friday. Not necessarily a tune I'd be playing on the back deck, whether I'm drinking a soda or otherwise, but you do you. That's what All Request Fridays is for. Fridays are also for our Friday 4 Roundtable, getting some different perspectives on the big stories of the week. Janice Jim, Julie Callflesh with us today. And Janice, I'll start with you on this last topic to bandy about, and that is the Netflix documentary Trainwreck. I mean, I'm not going to try to make excuses for anything we heard from Premier Ford this week, but another thing we heard from him is the word disgusting. That's how he describes the documentary about his late brother and the former mayor of Toronto, Rob. Is a documentary like this, Janice, offside?
Definitely not. He's a public official, and they use public footage. So as long as there's no libelous claims in the documentary, I think it's fair game. It is a documentary and not a movie, so that's the difference there. Documentary means they're stating facts and using actual news footage. And I'm sure for something to be on Netflix, it's cleared by the legal department before it's shared. So I think as a public official, that's part of your life, and his stories were already well documented in newspaper articles, in TV news. So it's definitely fair game.
You going to watch it, or have you already?
I have not, but maybe. But I don't know. I think it's too stressful. I need less stress in my life.
Well, participating in this show sure as heck ain't going to help. Julie, your thoughts on Trainwreck?
So I did watch it, and it's not very long. So if people are interested, it wasn't anything different than what we saw in the media. So it was really just strung together in more of a timeline. So you could kind of say, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot. He was a public figure. He was also deeply unwell. And so I have some compassion for that. Sometimes it's difficult to make decisions for yourself when you're in a state where you're that unwell. However, what I thought was interesting in it, there were a couple things. First of all, there were people from his inner circle who deeply cared about him and brought perspective to those incidents that happened and played out in the news. So it was interesting to hear from them. And I think in some ways it humanized him a little bit more. What I hadn't realized at the time that things were playing out was how Doug Ford was in the background for all of it. And because he hadn't come forward yet as the political figure that his brother was, he was around and you noticed him, but now looking back and he's the premier, you see he's right there in the press conferences in the background, sometimes encouraging some of the behavior. And so I can understand why the family doesn't want that out there. I think that overall, as Janice said, it was just stringing together of, news clips and things that we already had seen play out in real time. So there wasn't a whole lot new in terms of that footage, but it did, make me think about in the work that I do, working with folks who struggle with addiction. We are dealing with a lot of distancing from our provincial government right now, where there isn't as much support for the work that we do in the way that we do it, as particularly around harm reduction and consumption, supervised consumption. And so, that's always it's been a really challenging year dealing with a lot of the things that have come about, but also when you see this play out, you understand, because sometimes family members have the hardest time. They deal with the most, and it's so stressful and concerning that it can actually change their opinion about the services and the service providers in a negative way, because they can't see their loved one getting help. And so I did think about that through that lens, like, oh, maybe this is why there's less support for the things that we do. Because, he's clearly in distress, struggling with addiction, deeply unwell. And so it was kind of sad to watch, but fair game, public figure. And, he did bring some embarrassment to the city as well.
And certainly because of how embarrassing the behavior is, I think we can all understand why Premier Ford would feel the way that he does. But to your point, Julie, it's on our list of things that we will be watching. And I think back on what we did know about it and what we did cover as media and learned through the Rob Ford mayoralty. And what an absolutely wild time to be alive and following that story in Canada's biggest city. Okay, we'll leave it there for the day because the clock is running very close to noon. Julie Callflesh, Director of Fundraising and Communications for Sanguine Health Centre, and Janice Jim, the Vice President of Cycle Waterloo Region. Thank you both for making time for our show today, sharing the perspective on our roundtable.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
The Mike Farwell Show continues, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Sing it to me, Janice. Sing it. I love me some Janis Joplin. And we are playing your requests as we do every Friday, specifically this Friday because summer arrives tonight, 10:42 p.m., the official start of summer. So we're playing your summer-themed requests today. Janis Joplin's Summertime for Mad Dog. All right, Mad Dog, your request is our command. And hey, the next hour is all about your requests, not just musically, but the things that you want to talk about. Maybe it's a reflection on something we discussed during the show today or at some point this week, or something else entirely. We always finish our week together with Free Phones Friday, a full 60 minutes of open lines to finish our week together here on the show. It begins after this update from the 570 News Center on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio. Van Halen and some Summer Nights by request for Dean on this All Request Friday where we take your summer songs. Now, a couple of you, trying to be sneaky, requested non-summer songs. I mean, it's fine. It is all request, but we're trying to keep it to a summer theme. And it sounds to me as though we have a couple or a few spots left for summer-related requests today. If you want to sneak one in here during the final hour. Otherwise, we'll go to the rule breakers and just play any old song. It is an All Request Friday, and Fridays at this time, between noon and 1, we open up the phone lines just for you. What do you want to talk about? It is Free Phones Friday. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Mike will start us off. Afternoon, Mike.
Good afternoon, Mike. Can I request something? I joined you late today. Martha and the Vandellas Heat Wave.
Okay.
So I'd like to talk about this castle doctrine thing, the pros and the cons of it, if I may.
Certainly.
I believe that you should be able to defend your property. What I don't believe you should be able to do is shoot your elderly neighbor who has Alzheimer's who may wander onto your property, a teenager who may be a little bit inebriated in your neighborhood, and shoot him. But Mike, one of my cars was labeled high theft. You know what the insurance company wanted to charge me? And I've done nothing wrong, good record and everything. They wanted $1,500 more a year, because I had deemed a high theft vehicle, because our justice system is so weak. So I agree we need more courts. I agree we need some reform in our sentencing, but I also believe that someone should have the right to stop someone from invading their home or stealing their vehicle or doing that or doing whatever. I think our laws have swayed way too far to protect criminals instead of protecting the citizens. And that's my thoughts today, Michael.
All right, Mike, appreciate those thoughts. I can certainly sympathize with the escalation in one's insurance rates. And again, I'll remind you, we do have within the boundaries of our laws today in Canada the right to protect one's property, but it falls short of protecting it to the point of death for the person who might be invading it. And insurance rates, and no matter how much you love the vehicle, be darned, I mean, what's it worth to you insofar as what the end result of a confrontation might be? But I do hear where you're coming from. When it feels as though you, as the law-abiding, upstanding citizen who worked very hard to earn the money to buy that vehicle, is the one having that vehicle stolen from their driveway or whatnot have you. I totally understand where you're coming from in that regard. Andre, Free Phones Friday for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I'm calling because of a great panel with the two JJ, Julie, and Janet. Wow, they hit a lot of nails dead on. I really like their transparency and.
Well, you know how it is, Andre. There's only transparency on this show.
That's true.
Yes, that's true.
And that's why I'm there.
Okay, what do you want to be transparent about today, Andre?
About what's happening, like the head news, about where we are, about kids. It's, very unfortunate about the violence and stuff like that, that both parents are working, so there's less parenting. I know myself, Mike, my mom was home, and if I even think of something like that, she would break my arms. They were just a thought, and I was scared. If my dad lifted his hand, I was scared. I had respect for him, right?
But you still said, Andre, you just mentioned on this show yesterday that you are an ex-convict.
Oh, yeah, I worked every day of my life, and it was easy. Like Julie said, in the system, when the jail is loaded, you get back out at 1/6 of your time if there's no violence.
But if your parents were there and they were being strict and you were afraid of breaking their rules.
My dad was never there.
Okay.
He was a trucker. He was a workaholic like me. It's just things de-escalated by meeting different people, and
So you fell in with a bad crowd, eh?
I was kind of like a leader. I was a magnet of leading, and I have a lot of compassion. That's why I like the bar, because I keep those dumbass drunks in line, because it's not worth it. And all my life, no matter where I go, Mike, I always keep things clean. And that's why now I'm getting hurt, because society is very hurt. And I'm trying to do my best, my knowledge, to share that we can do better by ourselves and having respect to others, right?
Oh, Andre, I appreciate that. It's an excellent sentiment. And thanks for bringing back a word we haven't used on this show in quite some time.
Dumbass.
It's Free Phones Friday, where your calls spark the conversation. We continue on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Twas in another lifetime, one of toil and blood, when blackness was a virtue, the road was full of mud. I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form. Come in, she said, I'll give you shelter from the storm.
Bob Dylan's Shelter from the Storm for Phil on this All Request Friday. Playing our favorite summer tunes. I'll say more sun, fewer storms, okay? Bring it on. The heat wave can't get hot enough for me. Free Phones Friday continues. Kyle is next. Afternoon, Kyle.
Good afternoon. Mike, we need the weather. We need the rain. I got so much stuff that is growing in my garden right now that I wouldn't mind a couple of days of rain every week.
Nope.
What?
Nope.
But then this is the reason why we're losing farmland, is because you don't want to hydrate the farmland anymore.
Okay,
Mike.
fine. I'll tell you what, Kyle, how about this? Rain can fall in between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. and maybe on Mondays, because Mondays suck anyway.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I would say keep the weekends open for sunny weather and beautiful sunshine.
All right.
Would you agree with that?
I'll agree with that.
Okay, Mike, you enjoy your weekend. Make sure you cut the lawn today, because I don't want you to, get dehydrated tomorrow or on Sunday when it's 37, 38 degrees out like they're calling for. And then you know what they say, if you're going to get dehydrated, just drink more beer,
I will. Don't worry about it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good weekend, my friend.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. I do intend on getting to at least part of that grass cutting this afternoon. Greg, Free Phones Friday. Good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. First of all, any more song requests, or are you now full?
I think I might have room for one or two.
Okay, go for Summertime Girls by Y&T.
Okay.
Okay?
Is it radio friendly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, definitely. YNT, yeah, no, you'll like it. It rocks. So,
Okay.
Okay, so that's not there. And then just, on this Rob Ford thing, I don't know. I find it kind of pathetic because basically, okay, his lifestyle, you could deem it a family tragedy. And really, what family needs to have something sort of brought up to remind them of it? Like, it's almost as sick as the, parole trials for burnout every so often. Okay, family here, let's talk about it again. And ultimately, it's a cash grab. Someone's looking for that. Therefore, the victims are, Rob and his family, just like cash grab cameras. The victims are good drivers. It just, in my mind, doesn't add up.
So are you saying that you're opposed to the documentary?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's the thing, because I don't see a need for it, because then, we hear of weekly overdose deaths. Well, okay, let's have a documentary about them. Or here's one for you.
Go ahead.
What?
Sorry.
Okay. I only learned within the past year that a relative that I never knew took her own life. I don't know the details. I don't want to, because that would.
So here's the
I don't
thing.
need it now.
Let me just throw this at you, because you're a big music fan. I know this about you, and there have been countless tragic figures in the music industry: overdose, taking their own life, suicide, you name it. And there have been
one comment here.
There have been documentaries made about them.
Okay, but again, even in the celebrity status.
But there's somebody's family.
Right. So I'm not sure. Unless they're going to somehow learn something from it, or unless the families give the okay. Just like you have to have the okay to cover a tune, wouldn't you have to have some kind of okay to start using certain information in the way you want?
Public figure. It's all out there. It's just a documentary of the train wreck that was. I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, or even my favorite band, Boston. Brad Delp took his own life. It's still shocking. It's sad. I'm sure his family was never get over it. And I myself, I don't need to hear the details. Just it was just sad that it happened. But this world's sad, so not surprised really at anything nowadays.
All right, Greg. I got to move on to other callers, but I hear your point for sure. And believe you me, I sympathize with the family and the fact that the premier is currently the premier and very public facing, and they have to relive this through the media, if you will. But offside, disgusting. It's a public figure with a very tragic and interesting story. So there you go. Jeff, good afternoon.
Hey, how's it going, Mike?
Good, thanks. How's it going with you?
Good. I'm in complete agreement with your last caller. I think it was Greg.
Yeah.
We're beating a dead horse. I think our society takes too much pleasure in taking public figures and enjoying their misery or capitalizing on misery. I think everybody knows what happened. And you brought up a good point about the music industry. And I don't agree with that either, to be honest.
You know what? It's a very fair point, Jeff. Very fair point.
Yeah.
Yep. And
then the other thing is, I know you were talking about the Castle law. I was listening to your panel today, and I'm just wondering if anybody on your panel today has ever had somebody try and break in to their home. In 2015, I had somebody try and break into my business while I was in my business with my salesperson. And your adrenaline kicks in, and you're terrified, and you don't know if you're going to be killed or somebody with you. It's a very, very I don't even know what the right word for it is. It's extremely nobody can talk about how you could, you can just stop and calmly say, well, can you just please leave because you're breaking into me? We're not American. I will never own a gun. I don't believe in guns. But I had a police officer once say to me, going back about, 5 or 6 years ago, he was dating a female friend of mine. And he said, if anybody ever breaks into your house, the best thing that you can do is figure out how to get them out of your house, lock the front door, and say they were never in your house, or you could be charged. And that kind of really hit me. Are you kidding me? So I don't know. I think I don't want to be American. I don't want to be violent, but I do think people do have the right to basically defend their property, and maybe they have to use force to get somebody. If somebody's threatening your children or your wife or your partner, I think you do have the right to try and get them out of your house with possibly reasonable force,
Jeff, appreciate the call. And again, I'll just remind you, we do have that right. The question will become then, what was reasonable to you might be different than the law, but we do have that. Our laws in Canada simply stop short of death being the reasonable outcome. It's as simple as that. However, to Jeff's point initially, too, until you've been there, and I shared this through the week when we've been talking about this, thank goodness, we've had happen is a vehicle broken into. But the feeling of violation that comes with that, so I hear where Jeff is coming from when, until it's happened to you, it's very difficult to say this is how we should handle it or this is how we should react. I totally get that. With you on that. Good calls as Free Phones Friday continues. There's a line for you if you want to participate. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Yes, that is Boys of Summer, but it's not Don Henley. That is, or those are, the Ataris by request from JB on this All Request Friday Summer Edition on the show. Free Phones Friday continues with Terry. Afternoon, Terry.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Maybe you should have in the future one of your Fridays. You can have, like, since it's summer, you can have driving or cruising songs, like Highway Star or, Drive 55 type thing.
I like it. I'll make a note. I like these themed ideas. Nathan mentioned it a while ago, and he might be onto something.
Yeah, perfect for the summer. Yeah, I was surprised. Mary asked her. She said she doesn't always agree with me. But you know what? That's okay, because life would be boring with only one flavor of ice cream.
Absolutely.
Hey, Mike, I was going to ask you Sunday when I saw you, is James Sebastian Scott still with you, or did he move to another station there down the hallway?
No, James is no longer with us.
Oh, okay, because I hadn't heard from him in a long time, so I was just curious. Yeah. I wasn't sure if they shuffled him down to one of the other stations there in the building, but okay, I guess he's not with
They shuffled him right out of the building is what they did, Terry.
I see. Well, it's unfortunate, but, it is what it is. Anyway, Mike, that's just short. I'm going to keep it short. So have yourself a good weekend.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. You have yourself a good weekend, too. We always go into the weekend doing this very thing, Free Phones Friday, where we open the phone lines so you can have your say. And it's wide open to whatever it is that's on your mind today. It can be a reflection on one of the stories we talked about today, something through the week, or just something else that's on your mind that you want to share with the class, as we used to say. Something that struck me when I was listening to some news coverage the past couple of days is that I think maybe Doug Ford and Mark Carney are the same person in different levels of government. We can talk about that and take more of your calls as we continue on Free Phones Friday. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, I say it's alright.
Kyle wanted to hear the Beatles. By request, it is an all-request Friday summer edition here on the program. As Free Phones continues, we do this for the final hour of our show together every week. Free Phones Friday. Nathan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm excellent, and you?
I've got a bit of a cold. It started on Tuesday, so I'm going to try not to cough as I get through this, but I just want to thank Terry for backing me up with the idea that maybe the themes are a good way to go sometimes.
All right.
I also wanted to touch on the castle law. So I heard another caller that had an experience. I did too, back in the around the mid-90s, 94. I was dating a girl in Brantford. Her landlord had painter come in to paint the apartment. It was a ground floor apartment and a duplex. I was working that day, went over to her place for supper. She said there was a guy helping the painter that was really creeping her out, and she didn't feel safe alone that night. Well, sure enough, Mike, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and pretty much in the buff and hear someone coming through the bedroom window. You know, the old blinds, the metal blinds? That's what woke me up because I could hear him getting tangled up in them. So my reasonable force was picking up the ghetto blaster on the night table. I warned him, and he didn't move, but he took that thing right across the back of the head and then took it right into the face as I pushed him out the window. I managed to get her behind me, went and grabbed the frying pan off the stove, nice cast iron, and luckily he had already taken off on his bicycle. That's when the police said, I might have used too much force if I would have hit him with the frying pan. They did end up catching him. I got her to safety at a neighbor's. I went hunting for him, which was silly. I was just going to see if I could find out where he went because I knew the general direction. The police found him trying to break into another female's apartment that they were painting earlier that week. They came back and told me that I probably stopped 2 sexual assaults that night. So, good old, I think it was a Sharp radio, but he sure found out what blunt force meant. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate the call and the pun at the end. I remember those Sharp stereo systems. I sure do. Toll-free, Jay, good afternoon.
Well, sir, I just wanted to say, we were talking about Joe Bowen the other day. I didn't want to be insulting towards you or anybody else right now. I just wanted to give my true appreciation for him and for yourself for the quality of radio that you guys provide. And also, whether David Bowen comes in the future or whatever happens there, it is what it is. But I really appreciate the quality that you provide on a daily basis for us.
All right, Jay, appreciate that call. And listen, I am not so foolish as to believe there are not others who do a very good job in this industry that I work in. And Joe Bowen is one of them, soon to be was one of them. But don't ever apologize for saying, hey, I think that person does a really good job doing the same thing that you do. I should hope that they are doing a good job. We all should be doing our very best jobs every day. So I will never take offense. And you need not flatter me or butter me up afterwards. You can just say, hey, Farwell, I wish you were as good as that guy. That's okay by me too. Francis, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. I have a rant and a rave. As we know, so many people, when they leave their house, get on the road, no matter what, walking, bicycle, driving, whatever. They lose their brains, but swear to God. And, when you see so much happening, even yourself, when you think you're going to be cool, you're not. And my praise is to the St. Mary's Hospital. We got there good and early yesterday morning, and my wife had an MRI, and I thought she was calling about 8:45 that it was canceled. Here it was all finished. She was supposed to go in just to get there in time, and they took her right away, just like that. Everything was so good. I have great praise for the St. Mary's Hospital.
All right, Francis.
And I have to say, God bless.
God bless, my friend. Thank you. Remember, not St. Mary's anymore. That's the hospital I was born in. We call it Wren at Queens Boulevard now. And they get behind the wheel and their brains fall out. I thought that only happened to management at this radio station. What? They were fine until they became managers, then their brains fell out. That's an old joke we used to use around here. I'm not saying it applies to anybody currently in management. Never would I say that. Andy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. Great show today.
Thank you.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things. People got their property tax last week and yesterday's, or in the mail. But I worked it out as a 13.18 increase, where it was supposed to be 4.9. On November 24th, the city came out with, this is 2024, the city came out with what they think it's going to be, but it's way above what it is. But maybe people should look at that or have a show about it. The other thing was soliciting coming to your door. I thought they banned that back in 2018. I still got a lot of people coming door to door, even with the two top telecommunications people. I said, no, I've already got a phone and I'm happy with it, but they just keep on going on. But I thought soliciting, they banned it. But thanks, Mike, for listening to me.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate the call. I don't recall the ban on door-to-door solicitation, but I can look into it a little bit further. We get a lot, too. I feel for those young people doing those jobs, quite frankly. You can't get a whole lot of yeses at the door. On the point of the property taxes, Andy, you're not the only one to bring this up. I haven't done the calculation myself yet, but I don't feel as though, because I would notice, I'm pretty particular about these things. I certainly didn't notice anything that was that much more than I anticipated it being. But do not forget, and you'll fire me up. I know you didn't mean to, but you will always fire me up in this regard, because I think it's nonsense around here, the way we structure our municipal government. We do not need 2 levels, 2 layers. We don't need it. Stop it already. But what you get when you get your property tax bill is not just the city's portion, but the region's portion tacked onto that as well, because you don't get a separate bill for your regional tax increase, right? So that also goes on your municipal bill, and then the municipality, which is doing the taxation, funnels it back up to the region. I'm almost certain somebody smarter than me can correct me if need be, which is, it's just nonsensical to me that we do it. But anyway, so you got to pay both pipers, essentially, and it all comes through the bill that you get delivered by the city, if I'm not mistaken. I'll try to triple check that, but I feel pretty confident in saying so. So to that end, your increase would be what the city said it was going to be, plus what the region said it was going to be. And don't forget, the region was pushing 10% last year. 10! Free Phones Friday on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Mike wanted to hear some Martha and the Vandellas, and why not? We are headed into a heat wave, and I am here for the heat wave as we take your summer-themed requests here on your All Request Friday. Free Phones Friday continues as well. Preston Paul, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How you doing?
I'm good, my friend. How are you?
All right, thanks.
Good.
I think 44 of your listeners, they got great taste in music.
They're pretty darn good, aren't they?
They are. I've been enjoying it all day listening to it. And I think that we might be twins, because every time you mention something or have an opinion, I seem to agree with you.
Oh, Paul. I think we just became best friends.
Well, I'm telling you, it's just amazing, and just in how you think. And I go, yep, you're right. Yep, you're right. Yeah, I agree with that.
It's funny how my wife never says that, Preston Paul.
Well, when you brought that up, Gary yesterday, when he said something, the stupidest thing, that was only because the last thing that she could remember. There was a lot more.
Exactly.
A lot more. She just doesn't remember anymore. So, anyways, you have a great weekend, Mike.
Thank you, my friend. You too. I look forward to talking to you next week, okay?
You bet.
All the best. You bet. Preston Paul, he's a newcomer. New-ish comer to our show. Love having him here. We might be up to 45 listeners then. Walter, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I guess Paul must be bald and short too if he's your twin, right?
Settle down. Settle down. You know, those are the only two things, Walter, the only two things you're still allowed to tease anybody about. You can't tell me I'm fat, even though I am. You can't tell me I'm ugly, but you can point out that I'm bald and I'm short, and that's okay.
You said it, not me.
It's true.
So, Mike, I talked to you, before the Stanley Cup final between the Oilers and the Panthers. And you said that McDavid was on a mission. They were going to win it.
Yes, I did.
What the heck happened? And don't tell me that they ran into a hot goalie because, okay, fine. But that wasn't even...
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that Florida is a machine. That's what I would say.
Every time that they got the puck, they would throw it into Edmonton's end, and they beat the Oilers to the puck in the corner. And I don't understand that because they had it, they got all their players are in their zone, and they still get beat to the puck. I think that if Hyman, if he would have been healthy, he would have been a game changer. He's a wrecking ball, that guy. And I think that's, what did it in as far as, the Cats went anyways. But, well, Mike, I'm going to head back down to the lake because it's awful hot up here in God's country. So I'm going to talk to you later, buddy.
All right, Walter, I appreciate it. The most I hope from the Hymans, Alex and the rest of them, is that they don't mess up the ownership of the Brantford Bulldogs. Please don't mess up the ownership of the Brantford Bulldogs. Alex, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just want to touch base quick on, the sad news, actually, that they have discovered actual bodies and remains of children at a Catholic facility. I'm surprised I haven't heard much about it.
Where did you hear this? And where is this Catholic facility?
It was a Catholic-run place in Ireland, and they found close to 800 bodies of children in the septic from the 20s. And I was kind of shocked that wasn't making the news here, since we have our own supposed issues with that here.
I'm not following a lick of what you're saying or the point you're trying to make.
Basically, that's what I'm saying. Our whole country was in an uproar, and they found no bodies of any kind, Catholic Church children. Now they actually have found bodies in a septic tank in Ireland in the same scenario, and it's not world news. Ours is world news.
How do you wait. So I just want to be clear then that you were in Belfast, let's say, when it was being reported here in Canada?
So you
weren't.
They've not found any bodies.
Alex,
but that was
you know what
news.
You're really good at? You're really good at dodging the question.
That's you, sir.
No. It was world news, you said. So I said, so you were in Belfast to know that the coverage was happening in Ireland when the story was developing here. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not sure where your logic's going. No,
you said
the story of the
my
Canadians
point, Alex, it was not.
I don't get my news from you. I get my news from reliable sources.
What reliable source told you this? And how do you defend?
It was all over the British newspapers, man.
All over the British newspapers. Okay.
That's correct.
And the news about bodies at former residential schools in Canada was world news, and you know this how, Alex? Worldwide news.
At the time.
It was.
And by the way, there was no bodies.
Okay.
No bodies.
All right, Alex. You know what I love? The dodge of the question. Keep it up. It makes it more fun that way. We'll just keep asking. On the Mike Farwell Show, Free Phones Friday, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. That is Y&T, some Summertime Girls by request for Greg on this All Request Friday Summer Edition on the show. Summer arrives at 10:42 tonight, and the best season of the year gets underway. I used that commercial break to check into the story of the mass grave of up to 800 children in Ireland, which has been reported by the CBC, which last time I checked was here in Canada, even though Alex said he can't get his news here in Canada. It was international news when we talked about bodies at our residential schools, but I guess if a story from Ireland makes headlines in Canada, that would also make it international, right? And I'm sorry if you didn't hear it on this radio station. Maybe you just weren't listening at that time. I listen to this station a lot, and I hadn't heard the story on 570 News Radio just yet. But we focus a lot on local, and you can get other headlines and news at different times of the day on this station. Maybe you just weren't listening at that time of the day. But a very, very odd argument attempted there. Mayor Jake, you're going to get the last word today. Good afternoon.
Mike, how are you now?
I'm good, and you?
Oh, not too bad. Nice and hot. Can't complain.
Love it.
So, about 9 years ago, me and the boys and my brother, we went out partying, and we get home about 3 a.m, and my lady took me home. Like we were living together at the time, and my brother's still living at home. My dad gets to go up to work at 5 a.m. on a Saturday, sees a guy breaking into his car. Now, my brother and I are known to never back down from a fight or have a good old Donnybrook. So he wakes my brother up and says, "Hey, there's somebody breaking in my car." My brother goes out, confronts the guy. The guy decided to try to toss with my brother. My brother's 6 foot, 250 pounds.
All right, Mayor Jake, I got like 10 seconds left, and I'm right out of time.
So the fight happens. Buddy runs off. The cops come. The cops tell my brother, because you hit him, if he calls and complains, we have to arrest you for assault. The guy never did, but I don't think that the defense laws are as accurate as what people say they are.
All right, appreciate that. We got to run. Have a great weekend. This is 570 News Radio.